modern Western world does not often believe that such control is possible, so therefore its potentials do not need to be understood or even recognized as existent. In the 1950s and 60s, psychologists studying hypnosis proved that hyperamnesia was normal, as can be seen in the pages of the book titled Emotions in Memory by David Rappaport. If hyperamnesia is possible, it is also possible no person will remember if events are controlled by unconscious activity despite many being involved. The book titled Human Behavior by Berelson and Steiner showed that people who had been told to resist being hypnotized still became hypnotized. There is some indication showing if there has been hypnotic contact as a child, the potential increases. If such contact were intentionally directed to make the person unable to resist efforts to induce a trance, resistance would naturally be decreased a great deal. Generally, up to 30% of the population has this potential. On page 123 of Human Behavior, a degree of physiological control has been shown over cellular changes by the unconscious mind. It is known that hypnosis can remove warts and cause blisters by suggestion. These pages document work by Franz Anton Mesmer, who had a clinic in Sri Lanka where major surgeries had been performed using only hypnosis for pain, control of bleeding, and infection. The Lancet, a major English medical journal, did not respect the successes of the effort. Page 121 of Human Behavior by Berelson and Steiner shows two different types of hallucinations that can be caused by hypnosis. 1. Seeing things that are not there, and 2. Not seeing things that are there. Oral histories have implied suggestion, which can be escalated into instruction when reasoning with distorted consequence is motivated instinctually with the Maslowian hierarchy. If such reasoning is applied to the unconscious mind, and bearers of oral histories are told to hear the voice of the old bearer as they recall their oral history, they will re-stimulate their auditory nerves with memories of the voice they heard and deliver its meanings in a similar voice to the people who seek them. Psychologists have known for years that people process an enormous amount of information unconsciously. For example, when they hear their names pop up in a conversation across the room that they were not consciously listening to, they will become aware someone is talking about them. New reports suggest that people take this wealth of under-the-radar information, combine it with deliberately studied facts and impressions, and then make astute judgments that they would not otherwise form. This process may be less susceptible to certain biases as well. The unconscious brain has a far greater capacity for information than conscious working memory, authors of recent research have written. The UNTAP had managed a working knowledge base for a society with a combined effectiveness quite often exceeding, in a number of ways, our modern institutions of government, the church, the press, psychology, medicine, astronomy, recorders, educators, curators, and much more. What they worked with were the natural instinctual paths of human psychology as derived from communicating directly with the human unconscious mind. Meaningful points were accentuated or articulated through ritual that we might see as rites of passage. The human family was empowered for its higher purposes by default via general instruction to generation after generation of indigenous tribal members that was conditional and reciprocal. Marriage and parenting that respected deep social instincts were taught very effectively. Ceremony, specific to aspects of our mammalian nature, made a few simple words at age 5 be soul-shaking events 15 years later during ritual, matching conditions described perhaps 10 years before that. Women carried the genealogy and men the history of a people, all of the teaching directly to the unconscious mind. This formed strong family and village alliances over generations. Oral histories retained a much higher fidelity to the greater meanings of things, or ultimately the purpose of what we might call truth, mostly because a bearer of an oral history will not remember a lie which is known. and the full impact of emotions are often passed on because of the transference or telepathy associated with the deep trance. The histories became a factual appraisal of the past, providing a good basis for decision-making. The indigenous societies were often stable in a fully sustainable fashion and advancing on an individual level with art and creation empowered by the priests' uses of unconsciously directed vision quest. One of the primary reasons indigenous peoples of Turtle Island after colonization were forbidden to speak their language was to interrupt their oral histories. An earlier documentary titled Anapane concerned a winter solstice shrine in the hills and a street named Anapamu. The street runs across downtown Santa Barbara, and the documentary dealt with how the shrine and the street related to the survey of the city of Santa Barbara by Salisbury Haley in 1850. Haley had made an agreement with the coastal Chumash to lay out one cross street pointing at Anapane, the winter solstice shrine in the hills. That agreement was made in a trance as well as consciously. Haley traded the services of the Chumash as a survey crew as well as the guarantee of a liaison with a beautiful white woman in exchange for the survey as the Antap wished it. This agreement was discovered by city officials who created Ordinance Number 39, which worked to legally prevent Haley from following through with the agreement by fixing the survey's beginning point and block length. Ordinance Number 39, providing for the survey of the block and lots of the city. The Common Council of the City of Santa Barbara do ordain as follows. Section 1. Whenever any survey shall hereafter be made by the city surveyor, he must, in the location of streets, blocks, or lots in the line of State Street from his baseline, and he must take for his starting point the iron stake at the southmost intersection of State and Carrillo Streets. Further in the document, a block length of 450 feet is applied, which assures no street will point at Anapane. There were two reasons Salisbury Haley was awarded the contract for the survey of the city of Santa Barbara. Firstly, his crew was comprised of tribal members of the various Chumash villages, reducing the cost of his survey. Then his measuring chain was 3 times the length of the average chain, reducing the number of measurements by 2/3. When Haley refused to survey the cross street pointing at the shrine as agreed, his chain was stolen, then broken by the Chumash. History tells the story of Haley having a broken chain and not finding a better patch for his chain than thin leather strips that stretched, leaving the surveys quite inaccurate on the ground, or that perhaps a rope was used. The oral histories of the coastal Chumash indicate that the tribal people of the survey crew, working in the hot summer weather, drank water heavily and urinated on the thin leather strips to stretch the leather. They also refused to carry Haley's heavy steel chain back to the beach and measure in one direction only. Haley knew he was making errors and hoped to get them all going one direction, but he found no cooperation, and the survey was off a great deal in opposite directions by the time it got to Anapane Street. This map, made in 1853 by a surveyor named Wackenreuter, covering the city between Anapane to Gutierrez, then Vineyard and Garden Streets, depicts the city streets as they were supposed to be laid out. A trip across town 1 block from the beach on Mason Street will produce an impression of how severe the errors were. At Bath Street, going north, one must turn right and then left to cross Bath. At Chapala Street, a hard left turn is required, followed by a right to reach State Street. This old hand copy of a receipt shows Haley was paid for his survey. Today, we know many cross streets were badly misaligned. The documentary titled Anapane showed how a stone on the ridge above the shrine was cut to form a window, or foresight, creating a system to reflect sunlight from the horizon on winter solstice down the center line of what is now Anapamu Street. First the stone was pointed, then split, then a long rectangle removed. A difficult task. The window was cut into the stone 15 years after the survey was completed, and was done because the shrine did not have a street pointing at it. The window stone facilitated directing a beam of reflected sunlight down Anapamu Street as it existed.